Hi guys, so since moving on to a boat, my process in building guitars has changed a lot, and I just wanted to document that a bit and detail it and just put it out there for potentially anybody else who might find it interesting, but also just to show what can be done in a small space in limited power. So I hope you enjoy this, and if you've got any questions, please do pop them in the comments and I will endeavour to answer them as best as I can. Thanks and enjoy. Hey guys, this is Stuart of SBC Guitars, and welcome to the slightly unusual workspace that I call my bedroom. So if you don't know me, my name's Stuart. I build guitars under SBC Guitars, and I've built for about 7 or 8 years professionally, and quite a few years before that unprofessionally for a hobby. And I 2 years ago moved onto a boat, and I now build almost all of my guitars are, if not built, then quite largely finished on my boat. There are limitations to building on a boat. The biggest one is space. Now, space isn't as big a limitation as you think it would be. We have what we call the towpath. So I live on a canal boat. It's a 57-foot boat. It's a decent sized boat, and we move regularly. Although at the moment we're in a marina, just waiting to get some works done. We have got a towpath outside, but the biggest problem, as I suspect that a lot of people who've tried to build guitars in a small space and thought, I've got an outside I can use, is in Britain it likes to rain a lot, even when it says it's not going to rain. And when you're gluing up bits of beautiful, well-seasoned woods that you've been seasoning for years and years and you've decided to use, and then it starts raining, that's not ideal. We have two main workspaces, or I have two main workspaces that I use. I've got the area that, basically the bow of our boat, we've got what's called a crotch cover. So it's kind of like a tent, essentially, on the front of our boat. And then we've got a table, a couple of chairs, like fixed chairs. And it's where I do, honestly, most routing work, most of the handwork. And then I've got an area on the back of the boat, on the stern, which is essentially where we steer the boat from. But that's got a couple of steel seats on it, which make for really good little mini tables, vices, clamping things up. Really good space for doing dusty work, because I can put a few sheets down, and anything that isn't protected, basically it's wood dust, it just goes into the canal or blows away, and that works quite well. Something I've always struggled with a bit with on the boat is gluing up. So I have done that before. On nice days I've done it on the roof. On less nice days I have generally done it on the front. But since I'm on my own, and I know that with the glue that I use, so I use Tight Bond, dries in about half an hour, it will be firm, but it's not fully cured. It takes about 24 hours to fully cure. Since I'm on my own, our bedroom's kind of the biggest single space other than our dining area, but that is currently used more so by my wife as her drawing station because she's an illustrator. So rather than disrupt everything there, I thought I would make use of this space and do a little bit of gluing. This is torrefied maple, hornbeam, and just a little bit of, like, I think it's tulip wood, but this pinky wood in here is like a dyed wood. So it's already cut up. I am going to glue it up, and then I'm going to do like a deep set neck. It's not the easiest things to do in a small space, I would say, by an absolute mile, is a bolt on, because you've got the items separate. You've got a neck and a body. You can work on them small, and you can just screw them together at the end. It's a no-brainer. If you're building a guitar in a small space, build a bolt-on. But I don't like to make things easy for myself. So I've already prepped this up. It's already about the right thickness because I don't have a thicknesser here. All I have is a router. That's a router and a drill. That's basically the only power tools I have here. Everything else I do by hand. So once this is glued up, I'm going to have to plane it up by hand. So I need to do a little bit of design work, a little bit of prep work. But what I'm going to do is while I'm on my own here for 4 days at the moment. This bunting's getting on my nerves. This is our bedroom bunting. You've got to have some bedroom bunting. I'm going to try and see how far I can get with this build. So this is my top. I'm using a Venge top that I'd already matched in my workshop. It's got a little bit of sapwood in it, and I just like the way that the sapwood runs up the body. I'd already matched it and thicknessed it in my shop because there's no comparison with a freestanding thicknesser, sadly. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking out a little bit of the excess material before I route the top up just to make it nice and clean. I would normally do this with a bandsaw in my workshop, and it is quicker, but actually I've really got on with using this little coping saw. It's just a cheap generic coping saw, but it does a really good job. I've actually been using it for a lot of my various cavities and cover plates and things to do the bulk of the shaping on them as well. This is my pull saw, which, while not necessary for this job, is a really nice straight cutting saw. It hasn't quite been the day I hoped it was going to be. It was originally meant to brighten up, which would have been great because then I could have used my router. But it's not the brightest day, so I haven't actually ended up I was hoping to get the body and the top routed out, but as the scope of this has grown a little bit since I originally started planning it, I just don't think it's nice enough for the amount of work I want to do. So rather than splitting the routing over a couple of days, well, it will be split over a couple of days, but for the moment this is what I want to do. So yeah, I hand cut this. This is going to be the top, just rough cut, and then I will route the top and body out. And then beyond that, I've had a little planning session. So I've decided it's always worth just writing down what you actually want to do, because also kind of makes, for me, I find it kind of makes me pick a spec and stick to it. So it's going to be a thin line, so it's going to be semi-hollow, essentially like a Fender style semi-hollow, so the top of it will be hollowed out, and then I'll cut some sort of F-holes into the actual top wood, so the top of the guitar, I mean that section. It will be a set neck. I'd kind of already decided that, but it's good to just write that down. It's a new day, and it's still quite overcast. So I am going to work on the neck today, mostly. I don't think I'm going to have enough power to do the routing on the body, even though it's what I'd really like to do. But it doesn't matter which way round I do it particularly. It's quite nice and bright tomorrow by the looks, so I should have enough power for routing the body tomorrow, I'm hoping. For today, I've got my neck out. It's looking pretty good. It's looking fun. It's looking like it's going to be very thin and fast, which is what we like. I am going to probably plane this neck up. I'm going to sharpen my plane first, and I should have enough power to actually route the truss rod and the carbon rod inserts. There's plenty of power coming into like charge the boat batteries and things like that, there's just not quite enough power, I think, for the amount of routing I need to do on the body. There is a hookup, there is also an engine, so I could use either of those, but that feels like that's missing the point of this video in just using the solar power to build the guitar. Fretboard's dead easy to do on a boat. I do my fretboards in a slightly unconventional way. I have my own fret slot and jig, and I use it for everything. Although strictly speaking, my fret slot and jig was built for doing multi-scales. It works really well for doing straight frets as well. It's just, it's actually slightly more awkward for doing straight frets. This is my fret jig. It's pretty straightforward. It's a movable arm and then two little vice clamp thingies. The arm is magnetized so that my saw just stays where it should be, and with doing straight fret stuff, what I'll do is I'll line it up to one of the center frets, and then I will tighten this to lock it in place so that I'm always cutting at the same angle all the way down the neck, so the intonation's going to be fine. So I've gone ahead and I've trimmed up this template, glued it onto my fretboard. This is African rosewood, I believe, which is very similar to mahogany but just brown instead of red. I've cut matched binding, so literally cutting the binding from the fretboard. I did this on my bandsaw, and then I've got a little bit of this pink stripping to go in between. And what I need to do next is plane the actual fretboard itself up so that when I put the stripping on, it's the right size. Once I'd finished the neck, I'd kind of written off the afternoon, so I went for a walk to post a plectrum order to the nearest post office, which is over an hour's walk away. And of course, as soon as I got to the post office, the sun came out and all the clouds disappeared, so I then had to hoof it the hour's walk back and get on with some actual work. Thanks, sun. I generally route the body and top separately, just to make the load a bit lighter on the router. So this is our battery controller on our boat. I've clearly just touched it with dirty hands. So this is basically what voltage the batteries are at. They're usually, if we've got good sun on, they're usually at about 13.6, and then like once they're fully charged, and then once the sun's not on them, they drop to about 13. They'll then drop to about 12.8. And the lowest they should ever really drop is to about 12.3. So that's what we have to keep an eye on. This is our state of charge, so we're at 100%. Bearing in mind I've just done all the outside routes of the body and top, and we've got 95 amps coming in and 0.9 amps coming in. It's a really sunny day. We'll have at least 10 amps available to come in through the solar panel. So that's quite a bit of routing. My battery's still fully charged, well, pretty much fully charged. There's no amps coming in once it's fully charged, and we've got 0.9 of an amp coming in. It's pretty good going. All right. Yeah. So that is my body and top routed. Haven't dropped my batteries. It's mostly been done on the solar. I think some power has come off of the batteries, but it's so good solar, it's just going straight back up at the moment. I'm now going to start doing the thin line cavity. So I'm just going to attack it first with my drill and some Foster bits to get out the bulk of the excess, and then I will route it. I'm going to do it on both sides, so I'm going to do it on the inside of the top as well, because it's quite a chunky top. It's about a centimetre thick, so I'll take that down maybe like 5mm. It's, like I say, it's more of an aesthetic thing than a tonal thing. Aesthetic and weight. This guitar's going to weigh nothing because this is so light anyway. I'm really excited to play this guitar. So my body and top are all routed up. Put in the thin line cavity, and these are just for connecting up the pickups once it's all together. And then the top, as I said, I put in a cavity on the back of the body just because it's quite a thick top, and I've put in an F hole as well, which I've never done an F hole before. I've always just done a series of holes and seen some sort of sky-like pattern, spacey pattern, but I thought I'd do a little bit more traditional F hole. It probably could have been a little bit longer, but I'm pretty happy with it. In summer, the front of the boat becomes our entertaining space when we have guests, and my potting shed, because I'm old and I like to grow stuff now. So time to clean up and have a beer. Right, it's another lovely day on the marina, and it's time for some routing. It hasn't been so nice most of the week, so I just got on with making my fretboard. The only thing I have done is I routed the truss rod and the carbon fibre rod cavities in the neck, and I've just been doing some planning otherwise. So now I've routed one side of this neck already, just routed it true to the fretboard. I'm going to do the other side, and if I've got time, I'm going to try and start the routing to joint the neck to the body. Routing is always a case of measure twice, cut once, and particularly when routing in quite a confined space like this. Now, it looks like I am in a very tight space, but there's actually about a metre behind me between the table and the door. I would always say with routing, it's worth just taking as much care as possible and just making sure that you are doing it in a safer environment as possible. There's always the risk you're going to damage your work, and there's always the risk you're going to damage yourself. I used to be terrified of a router for good reason, and I still treat a router very cautiously. I have a few options to make myself feel a bit more comfortable when routing. So you can see that there's like a sheet of perspex on the bottom of my router. I always use this. I find this about the safest way to route something. So it just gives me a bit more surface area on the bottom of the router, means the router doesn't wobble so easily. I also have another table that I can use that I can bolt on top of this table, which gives me much more surface area. The reason why I'm not using it this time is because the downside to it is it does mean that I have to essentially sit at the table to route, which is fine. I'm not going to hurt myself doing so, but it can feel a little bit trapped in. And because I'm edging this board, I'm also using the edge of my little triangular shaped table as well. While he's doing that, let me tell you a little bit about our solar panel system and how it all works. We have 160 watt solar panels, and we could have better, but this has never really been a problem for us. Most of the year we run just on solar power, except for moving the boat. We have a diesel engine for that, and if we need to, we can run the engine for additional power, but we try not to do it. I'm still not fully convinced that solar panels aren't a little bit of black magic, but whatever they are, they're great. How they work is the sun rays hit the solar panels, which contain essentially tiny little semiconductors, which then generate an electric charge from the photons. This then goes into our battery bank via a solar charger and a whole bunch of other different gubbins, which essentially charges the batteries and maintains the life, and also controls how much power we use if we need to use more power than the batteries can generally supply, so using more power from the solar panels. The batteries themselves are what keeps us going on rainy, cloudy, miserable days, and what keeps our fridge on at night and keeps the lights on. So we do need to maintain the health of our batteries, which is what I was saying about the batteries not really wanting to ever drop below 12.3 volts because they are 12-volt batteries. Boats contain essentially a 12-volt power system and something called an inverter. So the 12-volt power system is absolutely fine for charging basically anything with a USB charging port. So phones, many laptops, things like that. It will also power all of our lights. But if we need to power something like, say, our laptop or my tools, we will use our inverter. The inverter is essentially just a big transformer that takes our 12-volt power system and scales it up to run two 40-volt tools. It's really good, but we do have to be careful with it. It takes a lot of ampage itself to run, and then also there's the added ampage of anything that might be moderately high power we're using on it. If we're not careful, it will flatten our batteries, and worse yet, it can damage our batteries, which can be a downside of building guitars on an off-grid solar panel system. So my next job is getting the neck sat into the body. I am going to do a fairly deep join to get the neck into the body, but not as deep as I would like to do ideally. Ideally, I like the neck joint to go in so that the neck actually sits under the bridge. So that you've got the same material going all the way through. It is a lot more work to do that though, and from a practical perspective, I mean, sonically I don't actually think it makes any real difference. I just symbolically like it. But from a practical perspective, it's just much easier if I just go a bit shorter, because then they've got a lot less cleaning up work to do. It's a lot easier because all I'm using basically is just little bits of squared MDF or planed MDF for a jig. Normally with this build, particularly with the Omicron 1, it's like a set neck and I've got all the jigs ready to go. I don't have the jigs ready to go, and I've got the added downside of I've got to use what I got in my workshop, which is a bit of piles of scrappy MDF. So now it's time to measure twice and probably still cut twice. I've marked it all out. I know where everything's going. I've spent nearly as long marking this out, but I've probably spent longer marking all of this out than I will spend routing it. I definitely have. The pocket's going down 8mm, so it's not the deepest pocket in the world. But then I've still got to take this down so that I can get the top on top of it, and then I've got to cut the pocket into the neck, into the top, sorry, to go around the neck, which I will also have to do by hand because I'm not using any of my lovely jigs that I spent years designing and making and could have used, but I wanted to make life as complicated for myself as possible. Leathery! My final job for the day was to cut the neck pocket into the top. Normally, when I do this, I don't do it by hand. I'd normally do it with my router, but my standard jig for this guitar build is actually a bolt-on neck, and as this positioning is a little bit different, I'm doing it by hand. I've cut it by hand, and then I'm just refining it with my files so that it's a good fit. Actually, my final job for the day was to glue it up, but I didn't record that bit, so here's some footage of me filing super speedy. Right, just a little update on... Woo! I had to break one of the locator pins two of the locator pins actually, but that's okay because I'd already routed the fretboard, so we know where everything is, and they're soft, so they're easy to re-drill. But I had to do it for routing the top. So what have I done? I've been away for the weekend, so I just got back today. It was really nice and sunny, but I knew it wasn't going to last, and it's already quite overcast and looking like it's going to rain. So I've just cracked on and got everything done. The first thing I did, it's going to be hard to see, but I've got a separate video, so I'll show that. The first thing I did was I routed the edge of the fretboard, because I'm going to put a pink binding on, the same as what I've got on the sides and top, essentially, but around the body. And then I also wanted to do a very like carve or a carve effect. So tried something new that might not work, but I hope it does. I've lightly rounded the edges over, so that then when I put the binding on and then sand the top, it should have like a slightly softened, smoothed out, slightly carved vibe going on. I've also rounded the back, which I might just leave rounded, or I might try and reflect the front. I'm now going to put the binding on itself. I'm using this pink material. It's ply. It is just not ply, sorry, it's veneer. I've got quite a bit of it to draw from. It's quite thick. It's about 2mm thick, and it's quite brittle. I think it's tulip wood, which is quite strong and quite flexible, but does need a bit of TLC. And I think the dye maybe makes it a bit more brittle, or the fact that it's been cut to 2mm and sat around for a while probably also makes it brittle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steam it gently. I'm going to wet it for the most part, I think. And where I need to, I'm going to steam it gently and just gently bend it, and then I'll get it glued in and taped up. Shouldn't be too difficult, but just take some time and patience. To steam it, I'm going to use my moderately expensive soldering iron. I've got like a 12 quid soldering iron in my workshop that I keep purely for steam bending binding. Did I bring it? Nah. So I've got my moderately expensive TS100 that I use for wiring pretty much every single guitar I've ever wired in the past 5 years. And I have got a wet rag that's not that wet. I'll have to go get a bucket or something. And I've got my jackery. Now this is essentially just a power bank. So just like what you would plug your phone into, but this has got a built-in inverter in it. So it will power 240 volt devices, which is what well, technically it isn't, but it's what my little TS100 is. And this is actually charged from our solar panels before anyone starts shouting at me. So what we do with this is, on good solar days, when we're not using the solar a huge amount, or we're just using it to charge the computers and there's still surplus oodles of surplus power, we just put this on charge, and it takes 5 or 6 hours to fully charge, and then it lasts for absolutely ages. This will charge our computer like 3 times fully charged. It will charge phones possibly hundreds of times, and it will also run my soldering iron. I've actually generally used this to power, because I often end up soldering a guitar later on at night when the solar's gone, or like today when the sun's gone behind a big black cloud and there's no solar. This is what I'm going to use. So not cheating, still technically using solar power, just stored in here. Right guys, I'm pretty much going to leave this video here, but for this last little clip, just to explain, I'm currently just routing out the pickup cavity for the humbucker. I've ended up actually ordering a custom set of pickups for this guitar. I really like the way it's coming together, and it felt like it justified a new set of pickups. My plan for this guitar was to basically just try and use up only my stock materials, but I decided that I've loved building this guitar so much, and it's been such a nice process while having so many other really complicated things going on, that it justified a new set of pickups. So it's got a custom set of Sunbear pickups in slightly retro casings that I think really fit the vibe of this guitar. In this video, I'm also just planning the control cavity layout, which I'll put a still of at the end here. Thank you so much for watching. Please do chat with me in the comments below, particularly if you have any questions. Hope this video has been at least interesting for those of you who are curious about my work process. Massive thank you as well to Charlie, one of my artists, but also a really great guy, for putting together the music at short notice. I'll put his details in the description below. Thanks again. Bye.